Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dell EMC Networking OMNM Tech Talk. Today's session is going to be on onboarding. And for those of you who may not know what that means, basically it's just the set of steps we're going to need to complete in order to get OMNM in a good state where it can be used by the application. Features and things that need to be set up. And so we're going to run through a series of steps here that are going to walk you through those initial steps. The session will be recorded and distributed, and it will be available after the meeting. So let's get started. We're going to try to take about 15 minutes here to complete this. It may take you a little bit longer, but I think we can talk about it in about 15 minutes. If you're prepared and you have this list, you should be able to do this in under or between half an hour and an hour in order to get yourself set. So we want to give you the steps that will help you get up and running quickly. Once completed, you will have an initial set of devices discovered and under OMNM management. You'll have mail ready so you can take advantage of the email alerts and other email functions. File servers will be set up and you'll be ready to do backup, restores, or operating system deploy. You'll have a set of devices backed up already and you'll schedule those so that you'll have regular backups taken of your devices. You'll have a discovery profile that is scheduled and executing at periodic intervals so that you pick up new devices in your network. You're going to have traffic flow information that is being collected so that you can start taking advantage of the graphs and reports through traffic flow. And then performance monitoring of network interfaces will be enabled so that you will start getting data on the performance of your network. Okay, the first step here is obviously you want to log into the device. Generally, you're just going to go to http:// and it's going to be your IP address, :8080, and the default credentials for OMNM are admin. That will get you logged in. First thing we're going to talk about here is setting up email. There's a couple of options here I'm going to show you on the screen for setting up email. There's a field called max send rate. Generally, you want to set that to about 100. It's going to default to 0. What that means is you're going to get 1 email per minute. If you expect to get maybe 3, 4, 5, or 10 emails in a minute time frame. If you set it to 0, you're only going to see 1. So you want to make that high enough so that you're going to get the emails that you're interested in and the volume that you think you're going to have. The send and connection timeouts, they default to 0, but you probably should just generally set those to 500. So where do we go for that? I'm going to the admin tab under common setup task. SMTP configuration, you're going to edit that. And I have a pre-configured Gmail set up here. And so this will work generally for you if you want to set up a Gmail account just to test that email is working. The problems we tend to see have to do with custom email settings within your environment, and it varies widely. And so always know that if you set up a Gmail account to test using these parameters, port 587 and TLS and these values here, then it's a good way to test that is the product actually working. And generally this is always working, and then you can troubleshoot from there to determine if it's your own internal mail settings. So as I mentioned here, the max per minute should be set to 100, and the connection timeout and send timeout should be set to about 5,000 milliseconds. So and then you can test that if you want, and it will confirm that your email is working. Once that's done, we're going to go to the next step. Is to set up the file servers for backup, restore, and deploy. So let's go back to the application. And under resources, file management, you can set this up. And you see here that I have 2 added. In my environment, I need secure protocol, file server, and I need FTP as well as TFTP. So I set both of those up here. But to set those up, simply a matter of right-click new and giving it a name. And then you provide the type of connection you want, and it's going to be FTP server with TFTP or no TFTP, and then secure. So pick what you need there, enter the IP address of your server, and in my case, it happens to be on the VM that I'm working on, the Linux VM, and so it's just the IP of OMNM, and then put your login and password, and you can ignore the external IP. That's for custom scenarios that have been discussed in other videos, but make sure it's enabled, and you can test it. So just to show you my settings here, give you a quick look at those, what I have set up. This is for secure protocol, secure FTP here is checked, and my information is down below here. And you can do the same just for basic FTP. And this is for FTP server and TFTP server selected. And so once you have that set up, then you can do backup restores and operating system deploys. Okay. The next step here is configure your devices. And so in order to do discovery, we need a certain amount of information here. And the first thing we're going to look at when we do discovery is the SNMP community and make sure we can get on the box and read what's called a sysobject ID. And so all the devices need to have an SNMP community setups that we can give to the discovery profile. This is simple enough on the N-series and the FTOS. Here's a sample commands. You can go and manually put these on the box if they don't already have it. Most environments already have these set up. So you're simply going to use this value when you go to your discovery profile and set up your SNMP authentication. Just make sure those are set up first. That is a prerequisite. The next thing is to discover the devices and schedule the profile for execution. Let's go back here. So to do that, you're going to go to your Discover tab down here. And I'm going to show you one that I already have set up here. For example, I'm doing this 10.128.23 subnet. I'm going to edit it and show you. Just basic information here. There's nothing you need to change necessarily down below here. Just put in your name, go to your network, specify the subnet or whatever range or various options here, what you want to discover. Then you're going to go to the authentication tab and set your authentication. You can either create new ones or choose the existing ones that you've already created. And as you see here, there's an SNMP here. This is the one that's going to leverage that community string. And then the command line, these are generally ones that are required. So you can have multiple here. If you have multiple different credentials, you can add those here and it'll pick the first one that works. So once that's set up, you can actually go straight to execute and it will go and execute across your network. But another way to do this is save this. Execute. I'm sorry, I'm not going to show that right now. I want to go to schedule on that same profile. And you can schedule this profile to run every day, every week, or however often you think you want to pick up new devices here. So you would simply just save that schedule, and that's going to put that in the schedule manager. And so now your discovery profile will continue to execute and pick up new devices. Okay. Next step here is we want to configure devices. Once they're discovered, we need them to send traps to OMNM so that we can take advantage of alarming and events and that sort of thing. And so some examples here I've laid out for both the N-series and FTOS series. And these are just examples. It will vary by device. You'll see here some slightly different commands here for setting this up. You could simply go to your action manager and cut and paste this configuration out and create an action. Let me just show you that real quick. So you would go to Resources Actions, just create a new one, new adaptive CLI, and you can just call this traps or trap recipients or whatever you want. We're going to do a CLI configure command. You can skip right over to your scripts and you want to add a new script, an embedded CLI. And here you can cut and paste those exact commands, config T or configure the SNMP community command and then exit. And then once that's created, you can then have the ability to go and take that script like in the other scripts here. And there's actually some pre-canned ones here that you can use for the Power Connect devices. And for example, here you can just execute this one and push that to whatever devices you think are appropriate. And so it gives you the ability to mass send commands to multiple devices to automatically send traps to OMNM. And so you can either use this one for the Power Connect devices, but if you have other devices, you can leverage these commands that I've shown you here. And again, you don't need a complicated ACLI. You can cut and paste this directly if these are your values, and push them all out that way. A very quick way to do it. So then after that is done, all your devices will have the command to send traps to OMNM, and you'll start getting those in the event window. Next thing is, sorry here, let's go back here, traps. Traffic flow analyzer. This is another one where you want to configure your devices that you want to send traffic flow to OMNM. You want to configure those devices, and so I've given you some examples here just to kind of show you sample configuration here. And so there's a couple of steps here. Generally, you configure an interface. You see here in the GI 2030, and then you're going to exit out of that and go to config again, and then you're going to put in this command here, sflow1 destination. Basically, this tells it where to send it. So there's two steps: configure the interface and the parameters, and then make sure you're sending the traffic to the target server. In this case, it's 10.35.35.192. Again, you can cut and paste this. If you have multiple devices and they're all using the same interface, then you can cut and paste this to an action script and just push it to those 3 or 4 or 5 or how many exporters of TFA that you have. If they are different, you're going to have to modify your script for each one and push those to each of the devices. So that's the DNOS, the Dell Network Operating System. And then FTOS, here's another example here. It's a similar thing. You configure the interface and then set your parameters for where it's going to send that data and the intervals and that sort of thing. So slightly different, and there's wide variation on how these can be configured. These are just some samples that you can easily push to a box and quickly get TFAs being sent to your OMNM instance. Performance monitors. The next thing we need to do is, oh, I skipped one step here. Let me apologize for that. Once you do get those devices into to start sending traffic, what you need to do is go to resources, and you can then register those devices. You see I have 2 here, and essentially just right-click the device, and I'll click one here that's not registered, and you'll see here Traffic Flow Analyzer, and register those devices that are sending that traffic to you. So at that point, OMNM will understand that, can start analyzing that data. All right, performance monitors, we need to turn on, if you're interested in performance data, we need to turn on the monitors. So we can go back to performance. We can actually go to Home tab, I believe here. Actually go to performance. And what you can see here is the performance monitors, and I'm going to expand this just so we can get a little bit better read on the screen here. And there's one called the default interface monitor, and it's on the second page. This one here is a default interface monitor, and what you want to do is right-click that and just click Enable. It's already, I'm sorry, it's already disabled. Actually, I'm going to edit the monitor first and show you something. Just so you know, on the monitors that the default group here is all devices. And so just be aware that there's performance implications if you have a lot of devices and your hardware's not sized properly, and you start doing, for example, polling of intervals at very small intervals. Even 5 minutes might be too much for your hardware. That could potentially get you into issues. So just be aware of that when you enable that you are going to be monitor all devices. And there's a port filter here you can look at. Basically, we're going to monitor anything in your network that is admin status up and opera status up. And so by clicking Enable, it's going to go and grab all these attributes you see down below here. So what you want to do is just right-click those and enable it. Oops, right here, Enable Monitor. And then it'll start collecting data, and then all of your performance tabs will start showing data. Your top end and your general performance data will start. That's a common issue when people will say, I don't have any data. Well, it's generally because this monitor is not collecting data, and there's nothing in those particular portlets. Okay. The next thing is to back up your devices that you have, and you can schedule them periodically. And so there's a couple of ways to do this. I'm going to show you some general ways. You can expand the resource monitors, the managed resources portlet, and you can multi-select here. If you want to do specific ones, you can go through and just multi-select those with the control button. Or you can do shift and get a whole batch, but basically once you select them, you're just going to go to file management. You're going to do a backup and to get those done. But that doesn't really give you a scheduled backup. And so the way I recommend doing this is going to the admin tab, and by groups and locations. You can either create your own group or your own dynamic group or whatever grouping you want to use. It might be a static group of specific devices, but generally you just want to pick a group here or create a group. And then, for example, my power connects. Let's say I want to back up all my power connects. I'm going to do a right click and I'm going to do file management. Get hold of that there, file management, backup. you'll see here, I'm given the normal options here for backing up, and I also have an add schedule here. So what you want to do is add this to the schedule. And then you can go to the scheduler and execute it, or you can go and execute this manually as well if you want it now. But I would add this to the schedule. So once that happens, everything in this group will be backed up. If it's a dynamic group, anything that gets added to new discoveries will be automatically added to this group. If it's a static group, then it'll do the same thing. It'll automatically just execute the backup on those devices. Okay. And then the last thing here, or close to the last thing here, is turn change determination on. I'm going to go to the scheduler for that. And so what change determination is the process of allowing OMNM to track drift in your config files. So if you want to see, if you want to know when a configuration in a box has changed, this process will run at periodic intervals. It'll compare the last known backup to the current one and say, hey, there is a change to this. And you'll get an event that's called the change determination trap, and it'll say that, reflecting that there's some difference in the config file. So that's very useful if you're concerned about changes on your config files. And so what you're going to do is locate the default change determination, and you're just going to go enable schedule. And that will automatically run, and you'll automatically get traps on that and be notified. Okay. Oh, the one last thing here is OS image upload. If you do intend to do deploys, there's a couple ways to do OS image upload. You can do it from Home tab, from the OS image upload. You can also go into Resources File Management and go in the image repository, and you can actually go out to and download firmware directly from the Dell network operating site or the FTOS. You can get that also from the Dell site directly. You do need to download that to a local drive and then import it. So once you download it, either manually or other firmware, once you download it on your local system, it's simply a matter of right-click, New, Firmware, and you basically just identify the firmware here, version you want, and the description if you need one, a version, might got 9.12 coming up at some point. Select the device class. It's going to be an FTOS, and this is basically so that it's basically telling the system that you're not going to deploy this other devices, and it restricts that. And then you can pick your FTOS images that you think are appropriate for whatever image you're importing here, and then you're done. So once that image is in there, then you're ready for deploy. Okay. I'm all set now. Everything's configured the way I think it should be, and so what now? What you can do now is you can add new users to your system. I'm not going to go over that today. There are videos that cover that and the rest of these topics. You can view and manage device alarms and events. You can run scheduled reports, set up auto emailing of reports. You can create event processing rules for alarms and events to email notify for events or perform other automated actions based on those events. You can create dashboards for your performance data. You can create ProScan policies to flag out of compliance device configuration. There's a whole separate video on ProScan, and that's a very useful tool if you want a little more discrete configuration over specific items that are in your config files. You can create custom configuration actions that can be pushed to one or more devices. As we showed you, the SNMP community, the SNMP trap recipient, those short little actions that can be pushed to one or more devices once you have those in the inventory. You can customize your topology views. You can create custom report templates and reports. And you can create multi-tenant sites for portal sharing. Multi-tenancy allows you to carve out parts of the application and allow access to specific devices. And so users log in, they only see specific devices, and they can only have specific actions on those. So that's the multi-tenancy option. You can set up containerized inventory, and this is alarms by location. Under the alarms tab, there is an alarms by location, and you can create containers. And if you want to have a hierarchical view of your devices, you can put them into these containers and manage your devices that way. Devices and alarms, very useful tool. There's another video on that as well. Okay, that kind of wraps up the session here. I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. If you do have a question, please feel free to just type it into the chat window, and we'll try to get to those. Yes, I will share the PowerPoint after this as well. It's actually, you see it already in the video, but maybe the PowerPoint would be helpful. Other questions here? Question about those containers again. Okay, let me just show you something on containers. I think I might have set one up here, and so I'm not sure everybody's used to this, and so alarms by location is where you want to go. There's already a container set up here, and so normally when you come to this screen, it's a little bit misleading because what you're going to see is just container view and alarms, and people may not know what that means. And so what you really do is you set up these container views. And so, for example, if I have a campus and I want to have, I want to show my computer lab devices, and then I want to show my psychology building, and this doesn't have to be location. It could be by role, it could be sales, corp, that kind of thing. But you can put them in these containers, and what you see here is they will roll up to the alarm levels that come in will roll up to the top level. So you see green here, it means there's no alarms on these devices. Now you see here yellow, and what you see is that there's a yellow alarm here. So you can quickly, if you have a large tree here, you can quickly see by location where your problems are, psychology and science. So you want to drill into that, figure out where those are coming from. So you can easily click on the top level and drill into that. And what you see here is now that when I drill down here, I'm getting the alarm for that particular container. And so it'll show all of them in that container. And as you can see here, we have some yellow alarms here. And so I can quickly drill into that and right-click and go to details and figure out what's going on. So it's very useful if you want to organize your containers in that fashion. And so there's one last thing on containers. If you go to the admin, it's where you actually create the containers. And so there's this portlet called Container Manager. And I'll just show you how the way I set this one up here. I'm going to edit this one. You would just create a new one. But what you see here is my hierarchy. I created a top level container and I added this child button here. I added other containers. And then what you're able to do here is once you're in the container, I'm going to edit this one, but you would do this for a new one as well. You're going to set memberships, and so you can create like a static group here or a dynamic group of devices that you want in that container. And then there's also authorizations on that must be applied to tell users or restrict or allow people who log on what they can see. You may not want them to see computer lab, and so you can say I only give it access to certain people, or if you want them to be able to add things to the container and things of that nature. I do encourage you to look at the video on containers if you're interested in that. Okay, let's see here. And again, you can bring up questions not related to this particular tech talk as well. We're here to answer any question you might have. So there's a question here about MAC address on a port, and how does OMNM populate the MAC address tables using CLI commands to the switch or SNMP polling? Good question. Generally, what you're going to get this from is there's a series of algorithms that we use, and generally, if LLDP is enabled, that's the best way for us to get the MAC address. And so we don't use CLI directly. We do use the SNMP tables from the LLDP data that we get. And then there's a secondary algorithm when LLDP is not enabled. We will drill down further into more of the network tables that are available, things like ARP tables and bridge tables and those sort of things to figure out what the MAC address might be. I hope that answers the question. If not, please rephrase or ask another question here. Anything else? Again, it can be off topic. That's fine. Okay, there's another question about actions. Again, there's several videos on how to do actions, but let me go back to the PowerPoint here, and so I'm just going to go back and see if I can cut and paste. Now, the formatting is a little off in the PowerPoint here, but for example, something like this here. I'm going to have to put this in edit mode so that I can grab this text here, but let me go ahead and do that. Something like this. Let's say I wanted to, I have no variables. to put in here, and I know exactly what I want to push to a box. And maybe I want to push this little box every day, the exact same thing, once a day to make sure it's always there. So you go to Resources, Actions, just create a new one, tap to CLI, call this push GFA config for FDOS or something like that. Again, it's going to be a configure command. And I'm not going to put any associations here. By not putting associations, it'll allow me to push it to any device. So if you want to restrict this only to FTOS, you probably should just add action associations here so that you have that restriction. You can also right-click off the resource manager, and if these associations are set, it will only show those ones that apply to that device. But keep this short here. I can go straight to scripts, add a new script, embedded CLI, Control-V, and now I just save that. I can apply and save. What I called it here, push config. Okay, make sure the script's there, save. And so now I can just basically go and I can push this, execute this. It's going to ask me what device, and I just select that, and it'll push that exact snippet of config right to that box. And so it's a very easy way to get configuration on the box. Okay. So question again about LLDP. As I mentioned, if LLDP is not on the box, and it's frequent that you don't have LLDP or CDP or any kind of discovery protocol, we do interrogate other tables on the network. So I'm actually not sure if it's CLI or I'm pretty sure it is actually CLI. And so we do go and get explicit information from ARP tables, bridge tables, and that sort of thing. To get that data. It probably varies depending on the algorithm here, but we may do a combination of SNMP MIBs data as well as CLI commands to get that data. Ask me again offline, send me an email, and I'll follow up with development if we need to drill into that further. The videos for the product can be found. We have a whole list of videos. Typically, that's emailed out with the videos that get sent out every week. And so we'll just make sure you look in the email. There's usually a link at the bottom that says where all the emails are found. And so I'm sorry, all the videos are found. There's an issue here with licensing. When I'm applying my license file, it doesn't take. What is the issue? So this may require a little bit more exploration here, but there's a couple things to know about the license. And I believe we talked about this a little bit in a tech talk already, but generally when you go to the license and when you have a new product, when you say you're upgrading, there's the base license that comes with the product. And so we always recommend, in fact require, that you apply that base license. So if you go to Service Pack 2, or if you have Service Pack 2 and you're going to Service Pack 3, there's a license.xml that comes with the product that's automatically installed. So that should always be installed normally, and then you need to reapply your license on top of that, your purchase license. Now, the purchase license only impacts the expiration date and your right to manage, and in some cases TFA, but generally it's just going to be your license expiration and your right to manage device count. So if it doesn't take, I'm not quite sure what that means. What you might try to do is restart the application server and the web server and see if you're getting the expected result there. And so I need to know a little bit more as what is not being updated to address that question. Okay. Oh, here we go. So the purchase license isn't being applied. And what is the indication that the purchase license is not being applied? Is it a updated RTM, or are you stuck on trial? Is it something else? So it's not updating from the trial. Okay, so I guess what we can go over here is how to apply that license and how was it applied. So there's a couple of ways to do this. You can go to the home page, and you can apply the license here, license management, and import it, you can select a file and import it. If it's not getting applied that way, that would be unusual too, but there's a secondary way you can do this. Let's see if I can bring up a command line session here. And so what you want to do is type the command license importer, and then you want to state the name of your license. And so, for example, I don't know if I have one here, but just give this command and append the license. So it's going to be my my license name .xml. Append that here, and it should tell you that it's successfully imported. If it doesn't, then there's an error. Then we need to know what that is. And so I would go that route. Try that first. If you've already applied that license, it won't apply again. I mean, it'll apply on top of the trial license. It should impact that. But if you, for example, if the subscription expires and you try to apply it again, it won't update. All right, I'm looking through some issues here. How are the ports detailed, portlet populated by OMNM? The SNMP or CLI? Ports details portlet. So let's go over there to that portlets details portlet. I think if I'm understanding here, we're going to go to the resources tab. So the ports portlet. I'm guessing you're saying when you go from a right click here, let's just find one that's up, maybe it'll be more interesting. And go to details. You're asking how the data is populated here. So generally speaking, this data is all populated during the normal resync or data collection processes that run in the background. And so when you do a discovery, that's automatically run and scheduled. And so most of this data, looking through here, I don't see anything that I can say comes from CLI. I believe this is all from that data collection process. Now, on occasion, there are things that do have to go down to command line to get that data. And so these learned MAC addresses, again, these learned MAC addresses go through a series of steps and protocols to determine what that MAC address is. It's LLDP, CDP, discovery protocols, and then it defaults to secondary algorithms, interrogation of other tables to determine this data. And so, a little more information, you can shoot me an email offline, and we can maybe figure out a more specific answer to your question if there's more questions on that. Okay, and if you're still having problems with that license, what I would recommend is shooting an email to support@dell-omnm.com. Let me see if I can bring that up here for you so you can see that. So anyway, I'm showing you my screen here and the links that we normally send out to people. And so here's the one for sales. There's a sales inquiry, pre-sales kind of thing, go to that email. If you have a support question and something's not working out, you can send directly to this email here, support@dell-omnm.com, and that will generate a ticket, and we can get someone to give you some personal assistance on any kind of licensing issues or any other issue. And then we'll send you the link on this too as well. But you can go to the OMNM Tech Talk video list, and here's the long URL here. But don't worry about that. We'll send those out to everyone, so they'll have that link. And these videos take probably a couple days to get updated as new ones are created, but they should all be posted. Okay, looks like we're out of questions. Hope that was useful for everyone. In terms of the onboarding, this is very useful for people who are just getting started. It's good for sales to tell people these are the first things you need to do once you get installed, and that sort of thing. And that way they're up in a good state and seeing the data they need to see and have the functionality they need. All right, thank you everyone for joining, and we will, I guess we'll see you next time on our Tech Talks.